welcome back. This is the last installment of my little mini series on Texas Senate Bill 8, where we focus on what this bill will cost. For this conversation, I'm going to give you a break from my face and jump us over to the fiscal note for Senate Bill 8. So thanks again to the Legislative Budget Board. We have a pretty detailed estimate of the expenses associated with this program. Which I will attempt to break down here. So same format as last video, I'll try to just summarize information and then give you a few takeaways at the end. So we are looking at the cover of the fiscal note for Senate Bill 8. I am going to just scroll us down a little bit here and focus on some of these top level numbers before we get into the more detailed breakdown down below. Okay. So the first thing we see here is the 5-year impact on general revenue related funds. So basically, like, what's the net effect on money going in and out from the state as a result of this bill? And I should note again that Senate Bill 8 covers a lot of things, not just education savings accounts. So not all of this money has to do with ESAs. But from what I can tell, the ESA component of the policy does make up like the majority chunk of this money. So what we're looking at right here is in 2024, this program would cost about $4.6 million. And then it really jumps up 2025 through 2028. So net impact is like $500 million in 2025, 2026, growing every year to 2027. By 2028, we would be spending about $675 million on this program. If you jump down to the next box, you see this broken down a little bit more. So this column right here is probable cost from the general revenue fund. You'll see these numbers are even larger than what we see up above because these are like the actual costs of the program. So you can see, again, like starting with about $500 million in 2025, and then actually ballooning up over $1 billion down here in 2028. The reason the numbers for the like net effect are smaller is because of this second column, which is probable savings from the foundation school fund. So what this column is saying is that beginning in 2026, we are anticipating that the state will have to spend fewer dollars on public school students because these students will be served in the private sector. And so the state's going to pay $231 million less out to our public schools in 2026. And then that number continues to grow all the way through 2028. So if you kind of combine that like net effect of like, you'll be spending this much, but then you'll be saving this much, that's where we get these numbers up here. And then third column gives you the change in the number of state employees starting from now. So this column is there to show you how many like full-time equivalents would need to be hired to administer this program. And it's 18 and a half. Now we'll see not all of that is connected with education savings accounts, but again, it's kind of the bulk of the staff. So if you're someone who gets a little bit concerned about like growing the government and adding more staff, expanding our agencies, like this is a bill that would grow the government. So those are kind of our headline numbers. The fiscal analysis section I'm going to skip over because it really just kind of like provides a recap of the major components of this bill, which we covered in our previous video. So let's jump down to the methodology, which is the really nerdy but super informative part. And I'll just take these in order. So first of all, the assumption here is that we would need 12 employees at the comptroller's office to administer the education savings account program. So keep in mind, the bill stipulates that the comptroller's office would actually be contracting out with a whole other organization to run the program, but like you would still need state employees to like oversee the contractors and manage all of that. And I want to make sure I'm not overstating things here. It sounds like there may also be some staff time mixed in here for some of the other components of the bill, but like all this stuff about like reviewing fund transfers and processing requests for distributions and reconciling account activity and all that, compiling listings of service providers and vendors, all of that is ESA stuff. So 12 people just at the comptroller's office to run this in addition to these like certified education assistance organizations. one of my favorite paragraphs comes next. Because this program is going to involve creating a resource that is limited, that means there are probably going to be people who are going to not get their application approved and are going to be upset about that and want to challenge that legally. It may also mean that there are going to be some potential private schools and vendors who think they should be approved and they're not, and they want to challenge that. And so Comptroller's office indicates a need for 6 attorneys to manage an extended litigation process. So we're imagining that folks are going to be able to sue over this program, and that's going to create a need for more staff and time and resources invested in litigating all of those things. The next couple of sections actually have to do with a different part of Senate Bill 8. This is going back to sort of like a beefed up process for letting parents have access to instructional materials and also initiating sort of like formal reviews of what's in the curriculum. I'm not as knowledgeable about that and won't spend a lot of time on it, other than this raises my eyebrows as well, because we're talking about like $12 million a year for whatever this new system is, in a world where like parents can already access the curriculum and there are already processes in place for vetting and overseeing the curriculum. So that's another conversation for another time. Just going to flag that because it's there. Okay, as we move further down, now we're getting into like the main cost of the program, which is actually providing grants to families in these education savings accounts. Okay. So here's just a reminder, eligibility is, there's 2 ways you can access this program. One is if you've had your child enrolled in public school for at least 90% of the preceding year and you're taking them out. And then option 2 is you have a child who's eligible to enroll in public school, but they're a pre-K or a kindergarten student and you're just going to start off private like from the get-go. Okay, so this analysis starts with option 2 and this paragraph right here. So Texas Education Agency helped out with this part of the analysis, and they assume there are 39,000 students in that pre-K kindergarten group who already attend private school under the current law. So even without education savings accounts, we've got 39,000 kids who enroll in those early grades every year. This analysis assumes 50% of these students would participate in the program and receive $8,000 per year. If I'm reading that right, that means the assumption is we're going to be drawing from kids who would already be going to private school anyway. If I'm misreading that, write in, let me know. But this goes along with the issue I flagged in my previous video, which is like, I don't know that introducing this money to families is actually going to like change outcomes. I think it's more just displacing the cost to these families. So there's that. And then this analysis assumes 43% of these students would reside in a district with less than 20,000 enrolled students, resulting in an additional $10,000 for the school district in which the student resides. I don't think I talked about this in the last video, but Senate Bill 8 does have this kind of like hold harmless provision for smaller school districts that might lose students under this bill for the first 2 years. So for the first 2 years of this program, if you're a small district and you lose a student who's using an ESA, you get $10,000 from the state for each of those students. And that's intended to help offset that loss, since you're a smaller district and your economies of scale are not as great as they would be in a large urban school district. So that's there, but do note that only lasts for like the first 2 years. Okay, so that's like our option 2 group, who would just be like going to private school straight away. The next paragraph focuses on the option 1 group, which is kids who started off in public school and are now leaving to be educated privately. And again, like a really important point here in this first paragraph, this assumes the number of students who'd be leaving public schools to participate in the program would be limited by the capacity within private schools. So this is just another reminder that education savings accounts are not a like across the board solution that's going to work for everybody, because private schools can only serve so many kids. And they're going to have restrictions on who they're willing to admit and keep enrolled. So just keep that in mind. So the assumption here is that private schools are going to accept like an additional 10% of students over their current enrollment using so that they would get additional students coming in using educational savings accounts. And then the assumption is that that capacity would increase a little bit every year. So assuming that private schools would kind of be able to kind of gradually grow a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger so they can accept more of these students. So the estimate is that there would be 25,000 students who would leave public schools and enter a private school in 2025. And then that number grows each year, right? 30,500 to 36,000 to 41,000. And so the expense here is $8,000 per student per year. And then same deal here. So the assumption is that like some fraction of these will be in smaller school districts. And so the state is paying out $10,000 a year for those districts in the first 2 years. And again, here we have this hint that like these students would generate a savings under the foundation school program. So they're saying like, as far as the state's concerned, we are paying less money to educate these kids in a public setting. So for the state, it's a little bit more of a win. Whether it's a win for the public school districts, not as clear. Okay. So all of that said, if you add all of those things up, the total estimated cost for providing grants under the program starts off at $512 million in 2025. And then as we've seen, it grows. So 755 million and then almost $1 billion by the time we get to 2028. And then that's offset by some savings to the foundation school program. And this is all assuming that like this program is fully funded, you know, at the estimated amount. Almost done. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The next few sections I think are not like super applicable. And then just want to point out one more thing, just in case it's not clear. Under local government impact, local education agencies would lose foundation school program funding as a result of this bill due to students leaving public schools to participate in the program. There is an offset. There's like a hold harmless for these smaller districts, but once you get beyond 2 years, you're kind of out of luck. So, you know, there's been a lot of talking back and forth about like, does this affect funding for public schools or not? It does. So that was me talking for a very long time. What is the bottom line on this one? I hope my math is right. But if we just focus on 2025, when this program really starts to kick in, we're looking at the state spending about $500 million plus, so $500 million like just in grants to ESA accounts, plus paying for a dozen state employees, those are new positions, plus paying for contracts with the program administrators, plus creating a whole new set of reasons for people in the state to sue each other, thus requiring all of those attorneys, plus depleting public schools of funding. And what do we get for all of that? Like, because to me, that is a lot of expenditure and a lot of trouble and a lot of complexity. What do we get for that? In the year 2025, it's about 44,500 students going to a private school. So that's like adding up that half of the pre-K kindergarten population plus the estimated number of leavers in 2025. Our entire K-12, like public K-12 population is 5.3 million students. So we're talking about sending less than 1% of our population to private school. And as a reminder, under the current provisions under the provisions of the bill as currently written, a good number of these students would probably be going to private school anyway. And a third of them would have access to a public school that is rated at an A or a B. So is this really the highest and best use of taxpayer dollars? You can probably tell it's not just a rhetorical question. I think the answer is no. And I'll say, like, I know, so like what I'm hearing from most folks who are opposing this bill is that we need to keep public funding in public schools. I'll never argue with that. But I would also encourage us all to think even bigger picture here. Like, even if our public schools were doing great and this really doesn't hurt them financially, let's think about Texas as a whole. Just some quick facts. We have the largest percentage of residents who lack health insurance out of the entire nation. We have 254 counties. over 200 of those are designated as primary care shortage areas. So like in the vast majority of counties in Texas, we don't have enough primary care providers for folks to get basic medical care. If you want to look at our child welfare system, it's a mess. Thinking about higher education, like post-secondary attainment, only a quarter of our high school graduates earn any kind of post-secondary credential within 6 years of graduating. And that includes bachelor's, associates, and certificates, like anything at all. These are really big issues. And I know like we're not going to solve any of those by saving $500 million or $1 billion from this program. But it also seems to me like fiscally irresponsible to be throwing around that kind of money to pay private school tuition for less than 1% of our kids when we have these other really, really pressing needs. To me, it's like, I don't know, like buying new carpet for your house when the roof is full of holes. It doesn't feel like we're setting the right priorities here. So that's my take on Senate Bill 8. Certainly explore the text and the analyses yourself, come to your own conclusions. But I personally will be giving my senator a call tomorrow morning to talk through just sort of the fiscal responsibility piece of this, because I think it's really important. If you're interested in doing the same, I will include a link for you to contact your elected representatives in the notes on this video. And yeah, that's it for Senate Bill 8 for now. We'll see how it goes. Thanks so much for hanging in there and listening. And I will give you a break now.